Pripyat, the ghost town frozen in time and the horror of Chernobyl. Welcome to Pripyat, a city that now stands as a symbol of the relentless power of time and nature. Here, tragedy has left its mark, but nature has reclaimed what was left behind. Pripyat was once home to nearly 50,000 people, a vibrant city created for the workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. But everything changed on April 26, 1986, when reactor number 4 exploded, releasing a colossal amount of radiation into the atmosphere. The explosion marked the beginning of a disaster that forced the city's evacuation within hours, turning it into a place where time seems to have stopped. Today, Pripyat is a post-apocalyptic scene that attracts curious visitors, scientists, and explorers. Here, every building tells a story, every street is a remnant of a life abruptly interrupted. Pripyat before the disaster. Before becoming a symbol of abandonment, Pripyat was an example of modernity and prosperity in the Soviet Union. Founded in 1970, the city was designed to house the workers of the newly constructed Chernobyl nuclear power plant and their families. By the standards of the time, Pripyat was considered a model city. Its residents enjoyed a privileged lifestyle, with high-class apartments, well-equipped schools, modern hospitals, and an efficient transportation system. The city also boasted an extensive network of leisure facilities, theaters, sports clubs, indoor swimming pools, and, of course, the much-anticipated amusement park that promised to be an unforgettable gathering spot for youth and families alike. One of Pripyat's major attractions was to be the amusement park, whose grand opening was scheduled for May 1, 1986, to celebrate International Workers' Day. The park featured an imposing Ferris wheel, bumper cars, and other attractions that captured the joy and hope of a thriving community. But the park, like the rest of the city, never had the chance to fulfill its purpose. The disaster struck just 5 days before its opening. Pripyat wasn't just a city, it was a symbol of Soviet progress and pride. Yet, in a single instant, all those dreams and plans were shattered, transforming what was once a place full of life into a monument of silence. The day of the disaster, April 26, 1986. In the early hours of April 26, 1986, amidst an appearance of tranquility, a series of decisions and circumstances at reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant would trigger the worst nuclear disaster in history. The safety test at reactor 4. The tragedy began with a scheduled safety test. The team was tasked with simulating a scenario in which the plant's electrical power was cut off to evaluate whether auxiliary systems could maintain the reactor's stability. However, from the outset, the conditions were far from ideal. The test and its delay. Originally scheduled for the previous day, the test was postponed, taking place during the night shift with a less experienced team. Operators disabled critical safety systems to carry out the procedure, an enormous risk made even worse by the flawed design of RBMK reactors. One notable design flaw was the positive reactivity coefficient, which rendered the reactor unstable at low power levels. Human error and critical decisions. During the test, operators reduced the reactor's power to dangerously low levels. When attempting to restore it, they made a critical mistake, removing more control rods than allowed, violating safety protocols. Pressure in the reactor core increased, but operators failed to realize the reactor was on the brink of an uncontrollable reaction. The explosion of reactor 4. At 1:23 a.m., disaster struck. The first explosion, caused by steam buildup in the core, destroyed the reactor's structure. Moments later, a second, more violent explosion scattered radioactive debris and burning graphite into the environment. The radiation released was equivalent to hundreds of atomic bombs like the one dropped on Hiroshima. The massive release of radiation. After the explosions, a column of smoke carrying radioactive particles rose into the atmosphere, spreading hazardous material across thousands of kilometers. At ground zero, radiation levels were so high they could kill a person within minutes. It is estimated that up to 60% of the reactor core's radioactive material was released during the disaster. More than a technical failure. What happened that night was not just a technical failure. It was a human and environmental catastrophe that forever changed the history of nuclear energy, leaving a trail of destruction that continues to haunt the world. Immediate impact. When Reactor 4 exploded, the consequences were instantaneous and devastating. Workers, firefighters, and local residents faced the unimaginable, unaware they were stepping into a deadly scenario. The clock read 1:23 a.m. For the first responders, their fate was already sealed. Accounts from plant workers. Inside the plant, workers encountered a surreal scene. Many described explosions so powerful they shook the ground like an earthquake. Everything went dark for a moment, and then the floor felt like it was burning our feet, said Anatoly Sitnikov, an engineer sent to inspect the core. Immediate physical impact. Chemical burns caused by radioactive particles and superheated steam. Nausea and dizziness within minutes. Just minutes after exposure, nausea and dizziness began to affect those nearby. The firefighters and the heroism of Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik. Amid the chaos, firefighters were called to extinguish the flames. Among them was young Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik, just 23 years old, who led his team on an impossible mission. Pravik's heroism. Oh, he led the fight against the fire, unaware of the severity of the radiation. Oh, his words before heading out. It's our duty. We have no choice. Conditions faced by the firefighters. Oh, uncontrollable fires with burning graphite emitting lethal levels of radiation. Oh, inadequate equipment, with many wearing only cloth masks. Pravik and his colleagues were exposed to such intense radiation that their bodies began to show signs of poisoning while they were still on the job. Without proper protection, the first responders received radiation doses far beyond what the human body can endure. Radiation facts. O measured levels, approximately 300 sieverts per hour near the reactor, enough to kill within seconds. Physical effects on the responders. O nausea, vomiting, and severe burns within the first few hours. O irreversible damage to bone marrow, leading to organ failure. One firefighter recounted, "We could taste metal in the air, like biting into iron. None of us knew it was the taste of death." Initial measures and growing chaos. Amid the confusion, authorities began organizing efforts to contain the disaster. However, the lack of clear information about the accident's severity only worsened the situation. Initial actions. O firefighters struggled for hours to extinguish the flames, without success. O helicopters were deployed to drop sand and boron over the reactor in an attempt to reduce radiation. Challenges faced. O radiation was corroding equipment. O helicopter crews were exposed to dangerous radiation levels during their flights. The heroes of Chernobyl's first hours. The workers and firefighters who confronted the disaster in its earliest hours became true heroes. Many, like Vladimir Pravik, lost their lives just days later due to radiation exposure. Chernobyl's first responders faced the unknown with remarkable courage and determination. Their sacrifices prevented an even greater catastrophe, but at the ultimate cost of their own lives. The evacuation of Pripyat. For over a day, Pripyat remained in the dark about the severity of the disaster. When the evacuation was finally announced, residents were thrown into a whirlwind of uncertainty. For 36 hours, the families of Pripyat lived unknowingly breathing the air of death. The 36-hour delay in evacuating. The alarm was not immediate. For more than a day, authorities hesitated to disclose the extent of the accident. Minimized danger. During the initial hours, local officials downplayed the incident, believing the fire could be contained. Residents were encouraged to continue their routines, many unaware of the radiation risks. A delayed decision. Only on the afternoon of April 27th did authorities finally order the evacuation. Until then, children played outside, and adults watched the fire from a distance, unaware of the invisible threat. Radiation levels in the city reached 3.6 roentgens per hour, thousands of times above the safe limit. A temporary evacuation. When the order came, It was framed as a temporary measure. People believed they would return in just a few days. The official announcement. The evacuation order was broadcast via loudspeakers. Citizens, bring only the essentials. This evacuation is temporary and will last 3 days. Residents were advised to leave behind documents, valuables, and even pets. Hasty preparations. Families packed only what was necessary: backpacks, a few clothes, and some food. Many left their homes with the lights on, fully expecting to return soon. A survivor's account. I didn't want to leave my dog behind, but they told me he would be safe. I never saw him again. In less than 3 hours, an entire city was emptied, marking the end of Pripyat as a living, thriving place. The evacuation operation. A massive effort. A fleet of 1,200 buses was mobilized to transport the residents. The process was efficient, yet the atmosphere was heavy with uncertainty and fear. Scenes in the streets. Families saying hurried goodbyes, elderly residents reluctant to leave, and children too young to grasp the gravity of the situation. A mother recalls, "My daughter asked, 'When will we go back home?' I lied to her and said, 'Soon.'" The feeling of loss and abandonment. The promises of a return were never fulfilled, and the evacuation became permanent. The impact on residents. Many never set foot in their homes again. The sudden displacement left a profound emotional void. Irreplaceable losses. Sentimental belongings were left behind. Pets and livestock were abandoned, many succumbing to the effects of radiation. An elderly man shared, "Pripyat was our home. We left behind not just our houses but our lives." The city left behind. As the residents were taken to safety, Pripyat remained as a monument to what was lost. The transformation of Pripyat. Silent streets, empty apartments, and parks that would never hear the laughter of children again. Nature began to reclaim the city, plants growing through cracks in buildings, and wild animals wandering freely. The evacuation of Pripyat wasn't just an emergency exit, it was the sudden and permanent end of a vibrant community, erased in a matter of hours. The Chernobyl Suicide Squad. When the world was on the brink of a second nuclear catastrophe, 3 men volunteered to undertake a mission that seemed impossible. They became known as the heroes of Chernobyl. Few know the story of the courage shown by Alexei Ananenko, Valery Bezbalov, and Boris Baranov. But without them, the consequences of Chernobyl could have been unimaginable. After the initial explosion of Reactor 4, a new danger emerged: the water that had accumulated in the basements of the plant. During efforts to contain the fire, firefighters flooded the area with water. This water accumulated in the reactor's basements, forming a massive underground reservoir. The reactor's base, melted by the extreme heat, began to sink. The imminent danger. The contact between the molten nuclear material, corium, and the underground water would result in a steam explosion of immense magnitude. Scientists estimated this could release enough radiation to devastate much of Eastern Europe, making entire areas uninhabitable for centuries. With time running out, a desperate solution was proposed: manually drain the water. The plan: find the submerged valves in the flooded tunnels and drain them to avoid the disaster. The problem: radiation levels were fatal, and the underground environment was dark, narrow, and contaminated. The volunteers: Alexei Ananenko, engineer responsible for the valves; Valery Bezbalov, plant engineer; Boris Baranov, shift supervisor. Despite knowing the mission would practically be a death sentence, the 3 volunteered because of their technical expertise and sense of duty. A quote from Alexei: "If we don't do this, no one else will." There's no choice. The risks they faced. The men entered the tunnels knowing that the radiation could kill them within days. The deadly environment. Dark tunnels, filled with radioactive water up to their waists. Intense radiation penetrating through their protective clothing. Additionally, there was the risk of being buried alive or the valves not working. The journey. Armed with lanterns that barely worked, they advanced through the tunnels, guided only by the sound of water and their memory of the system. The radiation levels were so high that the dosimeter readings stopped functioning. The heroic success. After hours of tireless work, the impossible was achieved. The valves were opened, and the water began to drain. The decisive moment. When the water started to flow, the men emerged from the tunnels, exhausted but victorious. The result. The steam explosion was prevented. Radiation remained a threat, but Europe was spared from an even greater catastrophe. A quote from one of the men upon emerging: "We did it. The world doesn't have to fear this anymore." The legacy of the heroes. These three men risked everything, and the world owes them eternal gratitude. The fate of the volunteers. Initial reports suggested that all three died shortly after the mission due to lethal radiation exposure. It was later revealed that they survived for years, though they faced severe health problems. Posthumous recognition. Alexei Ananenko and Valery Bespalov were posthumously decorated. Boris Baranov passed away in 2005. The Chernobyl suicide squad didn't just save a city, they saved the future of millions. An act of heroism that continues to echo through history. Long-term consequences. The Chernobyl disaster left deep scars on the environment, humanity, and the global perception of nuclear energy. Decades later, the consequences still resonate. Chernobyl is not just a story of the past, but a permanent reminder of the impact of our actions. Environmental impact. The explosion of Reactor 4 released radioactive particles on an unprecedented scale, creating an exclusion zone that still exists today. Exclusion zone. It covers 2,600 square kilometers around the plant, where human presence is severely restricted. The soil, water, and plants absorbed high levels of radiation, making the area uninhabitable for decades, possibly centuries. Some isotopes, such as cesium-137 and strontium-90, still pose a danger due to their long half-lives. Wildlife resurgence. Despite the radiation, the absence of humans allowed nature to recover at remarkable levels. Animals such as wolves, Przewalski's horses, lynxes, and brown bears thrive in the region. A contradictory example. Radiation can cause mutations and shorten the lifespan of many organisms, but the lack of human pressure created an unexpected refuge. Amid devastation, nature found a way to flourish. Human impact. If the environment found a way to recover, for humans, the impact was devastating. Radiation-induced diseases. Thyroid cancer. There was a significant increase in cases, especially among children and adolescents exposed to iodine-131. Other types of cancer and cardiovascular diseases were also linked to radiation exposure. Acute radiation syndrome, ARS, severely affected workers and first responders who were on site in the early hours. Psychological trauma. The forced displacement of around 350,000 people left deep emotional scars. Many could never return to their homes, facing feelings of loss, abandonment, and uncertainty. The social stigma against the liquidators, workers who helped with containment, and the displaced intensified the emotional impact. Intergenerational impact. Studies suggest that children of survivors may show genetic changes related to their parents' exposure. Global nuclear safety changes. Chernobyl was a turning point for nuclear safety worldwide. Immediate impact. The Soviet Union implemented reforms to the design of RBMK reactors, including the addition of automated safety systems. International transparency was increased to prevent similar disasters from being covered up. International influence. Many countries suspended or abandoned nuclear projects, fearing the associated risks. Organizations such as the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, introduced stricter regulations and more frequent audits. Nuclear legacy. While some countries, like Germany, decided to shut down their nuclear plants, others continued to invest, arguing that technological advancements could prevent similar tragedies. The Fukushima disaster in 2011 reignited debates on nuclear safety, often compared to Chernobyl. Chernobyl forever changed the course of nuclear energy, but the lesson came at too high a cost. The consequences of Chernobyl serve as a grim reminder of our responsibility in handling powerful technologies. The balance between progress and safety remains a global issue. The environmental recovery of the exclusion zone shows nature's resilience, but the human mark of the disaster will be felt for generations. Chernobyl is not just a place, it is a symbol of the choices that shape our future. The sarcophagus and the new safe confinement, NSC. After the explosion of Reactor 4 at Chernobyl, containing the radiation became a race against time. The sarcophagus was an emergency solution, but the challenge of dealing with the radiation required an even more advanced approach. Amidst the devastation, a colossal challenge emerged: how to contain the invisible danger threatening the entire world. The initial sarcophagus. With limited resources and a deadly environment, efforts to contain the reactor began immediately. Emergency construction. In 1986, around 600,000 workers, known as liquidators, were mobilized to create a concrete and steel enclosure around Reactor 4. The construction took place under extreme conditions, with high levels of radiation and tight deadlines. The sarcophagus was completed in just 206 days, covering the area to reduce radiation release. Structural problems. The project was executed hastily, with no long-term durability plans. Cracks in the concrete started appearing within the following years, allowing water to enter and compromising radiation containment. Over time, parts of the ceiling collapsed, increasing the risk of further breakdowns. Although it prevented an immediate disaster, the sarcophagus was a temporary solution that brought new challenges. The new safe confinement, NSC. Given the deterioration of the initial sarcophagus, a modern and sustainable solution became essential. Development of the NSC. Designed in 2007 and completed in 2016, the new safe confinement is a gigantic structure built to last at least 100 years. Made of stainless steel, the NSC is the largest movable structure ever built, weighing around 36,000 tons and standing 108 meters tall. The structure was assembled 180 meters away from the site and carefully slid over the old sarcophagus, an unprecedented engineering feat. Functions of the NSC. Complete containment of the residual radiation from Reactor 4. Creation of a safe environment for dismantling the original sarcophagus and managing the internal radioactive waste. Integration of advanced ventilation and monitoring systems to ensure continuous safety. A monumental engineering work to contain one of the greatest disasters in history. The challenge of radioactive waste. Although the NSC is an impressive solution, it is only the beginning of the battle against the waste left behind by Chernobyl. Radioactive material in Reactor 4. About 200 tons of nuclear material are still present beneath the original sarcophagus, including a highly dangerous substance called elephant's foot, a mass of solidified corium. This material emits intense radiation and will remain a risk for thousands of years. Dismantling processes. The safe removal of radioactive material is a technical challenge, with estimates indicating it could take decades to complete. Specially designed robots are used, as radiation is deadly to humans. Storage and disposal. Even after removal, the waste will need to be stored safely in specialized locations for hundreds of years. The international community continues to research more effective methods for dealing with this waste. Each step of this process demands cutting-edge technology and decades of planning. The legacy of the NSC. The new safe confinement is not just a technical solution, it is a symbol of international cooperation. Global collaboration. The project was funded by over 40 countries, with a total cost of $1.5 billion. It represents the unity of nations in the pursuit of nuclear and environmental safety. Inspiration for the future. The NSC is a reminder of the importance of investing in nuclear risk prevention and management. It also serves as a lesson about the collective responsibility to deal with the consequences of industrial disasters. In Chernobyl, modern engineering built a monument to human resilience in the face of the greatest nuclear disaster in history. Pripyat today, beauty and tragedy. The awakening of Pripyat. Time has passed, but the memory of Chernobyl persists. Today, Pripyat is a place where tragedy meets nature in recovery, in a silent dance where the beautiful and the deadly coexist. In a desolate paradox, life attempts to reclaim what was lost, yet radiation still dominates the space, invisible and deadly. The contrast of nature's recovery and radiation. In Pripyat, wildlife thrives, but the shadow of radiation never fully fades. Nature's rebirth. In Pripyat, far from human presence, nature has begun to thrive once again. Trees, plants, and animals have invaded the deserted city, creating a surreal scene of a forest growing over an abandoned metropolis. The number of wild animals, such as wolves, boars, elk, and deer, has increased significantly, as the city is no longer inhabited by humans. Persistent radiation. Radiation still permeates many of the buildings, and areas like the Red Forest, near the plant, remain extremely dangerous. Even in seemingly safe areas, radiation levels are closely monitored, as prolonged exposure can lead to serious health issues. The plants that have grown in the area are part of an unusual natural phenomenon, but radiation makes them potentially hazardous. Nature, which was cruelly interrupted by disaster, now tries to rebuild itself, but not without the constant presence of the invisible threat of radiation. Iconic places in Pripyat, the remembrance of tragedy. Amid the greenery, what remains of Pripyat is a field of memory and silence, where time seems to have stopped. The Ferris wheel. The famous Ferris wheel in Pripyat's amusement park, which was never opened, is one of the most iconic symbols of the city. Originally planned to open on May Day in 1986, it remains stationary to this day, a monument to the tragedy and the interrupted fate of Pripyat's inhabitants. Despite the idyllic scenery surrounding it, the Ferris wheel is a constant reminder of the catastrophe and the void that remains. Visual. Images of the rusty Ferris wheel, covered in vegetation, with the horizon in the background. Narration. The Ferris wheel, forever frozen, symbolizes dreams that were never realized. The Red Forest. The Red Forest got its name due to the reddish color of the trees, which died from high radiation exposure after the disaster. Located to the west of Pripyat, this area is one of the most contaminated places in the world, but also one of the most mysterious and photogenic parts of the exclusion zone. The forest, now in recovery, still carries the echoes of radiation that will remain active for generations. The Red Forest, a field of death and rebirth, where the silence of radiation echoes in the wind. The abandoned buildings. The buildings of Pripyat, once home to a thriving city, are now empty, with furniture and personal belongings still inside, covered in dust and debris. The city seems frozen in time, with calendars marking the month of April 1986, the month of the disaster. The buildings, in ruins, hold traces of the lives that were abruptly interrupted. Every window, every room, is a portrait of the tragedy that will never be forgotten. The legacy of Pripyat, reflections on tragedy and recovery. Pripyat today is a place where human history intersects with nature's mysteries, a reminder that the impact of our actions can last long beyond our lives. The city, although marked by tragedy, serves as a point of study for scientists and environmentalists, who observe the recovery of wildlife and the long-term effects of radiation on the environment. Despite the presence of radiation, Pripyat is also a symbol of resilience, showing how nature can recover, though never without the cost of human impact. Tourism and the Pripyat Memorial. Today, the city of Pripyat and the exclusion zone have become a tourist destination for those seeking to understand more about the Chernobyl disaster. Tourism, although controlled, allows people to experience a place where the history of the disaster is still very much alive. Pripyat today is a city that lives in the collective memory. Its legacy is not only one of destruction, but also of lessons that continue to teach the world about the limits of our intervention on the planet. Chernobyl, a landmark in human history. Chernobyl is not just a nuclear disaster. It's a grim reminder that the pursuit of control over nature must be balanced with responsibility and respect for forces we can't fully understand. The catastrophe as a historic turning point. The Chernobyl disaster, which occurred in 1986, not only altered the course of nuclear energy history, but also left an indelible mark on global collective consciousness. It was a turning point in the debate over the dangers of nuclear energy, the control of advanced technologies, and the human and environmental costs of these advances. The city of Pripyat, with its evacuated population and the devastated nuclear plant, became the symbol of one of humanity's greatest mistakes in handling powerful technologies. Global impact. The Chernobyl disaster transcended the borders of the Soviet Union, affecting distant countries like Sweden and Japan with the spread of radiation. In the long term, this event sparked a global movement for transparency, nuclear safety, and environmental monitoring. Lessons learned, technology, safety, and environmental impact. Chernobyl teaches us that, even in our relentless pursuit of progress and innovation, we must be humble in the face of the dangers that technologies can bring. Technology and human limits. The disaster exposed flaws in the RBMK reactor design and human failures in the decision-making process, highlighting how design flaws can become catastrophic when there is no robust safety and security protocol. Although technology has advanced, Chernobyl reinforced the importance of always keeping in mind the limits of human knowledge and the potential consequences of poorly understood or mismanaged technologies. Nuclear safety. After Chernobyl, there was a global reassessment of nuclear safety procedures, with the strengthening of regulations and systems to prevent failures. The lesson was clear. Safety cannot be a secondary concern, and transparency, both in the design and operation of nuclear facilities, is crucial to avoid repeating such a disaster. Environmental impact and nature's resilience. The disaster also taught us about the profound and lasting effects of radiation on the environment, but also about nature's remarkable ability to regenerate, even after decades of contamination. At the same time, radiation reminded us that environmental impact is not something that fades with time, and the consequences of a disaster like Chernobyl can extend for centuries. The world is filled with unsolved mysteries, forgotten stories, and enigmas that still challenge our understanding. If you were moved by the story of Chernobyl, join us as we explore more of these mysteries and uncover the issues that shaped our past. Chernobyl is just one of many mysterious and cataclysmic events that have shaped human history. On this channel, you will be taken to remote places, enigmatic events, and inexplicable phenomena that defy logic and reason. If you were fascinated by this story, imagine what else the world has to offer. Every enigma has something to teach us. Keep following the channel and come discover more mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to not miss the next videos. And if you're already a fan of the world's mysteries, share with your friends and help spread the curiosity. Chernobyl remains one of the greatest mysteries of our time, but the lessons it left us continue to shape the world we live in. The story of Pripyat and Chernobyl is a story of failures, but also of learning and resilience. Until the next video, where more mysteries await us. The world is full of stories to tell, and we are here to unravel them. Stay with us on this journey.